is working. Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, members can hold charter biologist and one of the other registrations at the same time. So that might be like CSci and CBiol, or for some people on one of our more specialist registers, we have like the UK Register of Toxicologists, they might hold that and CBiol at the same time. Anyone who is on 2 registers can use the same CPD to apply to both the registers. We'll go through CPD a bit later. So charter biologist. Charter biologist is a registration offered solely by the Royal Society of Biology. Chartership is a gold standard of professional recognition, and it demonstrates working to high standards, a commitment to professional development, and demonstrates your professional knowledge and skills working at a high level. It also demonstrates integrity in your work, a level of responsibility, and is a mark of excellence recognized in the UK and abroad. Currently, we have over 3,500 charter biologists with the RSB, and the aim over the next few years is to keep growing this number. So part of your role as assessors will be to kind of advocate for CBiol where it's appropriate to do so. So maybe at an event, if you're just chatting to somebody, networking at conferences, that kind of thing. So this is a summary of our charterships, just to show the experience requirements for them. I've compared CBiol in the middle to CSci Teach and CSci, just because they're quite similar levels. So each one would usually include some experience in a leadership role or senior role within the organization. At least roughly 6 years of work experience is required for each. The only difference for CBiol, where somebody might have slightly fewer years of work experience, is if they're applying via a CPD route. So that means if somebody has been a member with the RSB for 2 years and has completed CPD for both of those years, then they would be eligible to apply for chartered biologists. So it kind of allows, again, it's like the CPD route in, allowing slightly less work experience. The qualification levels for these are equivalent to level 7, which is the equivalent of a master's degree in the UK or higher. Normally the work experience and qualifications are checked by myself or my colleague Francesca before applications go to assessors. So we will kind of do the detailed checks on that before it goes through to you guys. So you don't need to worry too much. But if there is ever any questions, or you think, well, actually, maybe this person shouldn't have gone through, you can just let us know. And then the competence section in each application, everyone has to do that. Everyone on these registers has to maintain CPD, and the minimum membership for each is member level, so MRSB. So I've mentioned CPD a few times now. As you all know, and you're all doing to a good standard, CPD is a requirement to maintain registrations. This is part of a requirement from the Science Council, and the RSB has it on our other registers as well. So we also have it for chartered biologists, plant health scientists, and the UK Register of Toxicology. So there's 5 different categories of CPD. There's work-based learning, formal or educational learning, professional activity, self-directed learning, and then other, which encompasses anything else. So an example of professional activity would be working with a professional body. So for you guys attending this training, that counts as CPD, and that will probably fall under professional activity or formal or educational learning. So part of everyone's registration is completing CPD, and we conduct a CPD audit of registrants once per year. So this is where we take a sample of everyone from each register, look at their CPD record in more detail, let them know if they're, and then we give them feedback on whether their CPD is meeting requirements, or if it's not, we kind of instruct them on how they might improve this. Part of your application, myself and the team looked at your CPD record, so I'm pleased to report that all of you have adequate CPD records for the last few years. These are the CPD standards that we use. They're the same or very similar to the Science Council standards so that we can apply them to all registers together. So the first one is maintaining a continuous, up-to-date and accurate CPD record. So this is kind of telling people that they should be aiming to record their CPD throughout the course of the year, rather than just, logging on the last day before it's due, putting everything in that they've done the last year. So it just means that people kind of record it as they go through, maybe once per month or something like that. The second one is that registrants must demonstrate their CPD is a mixture of learning activities relevant to their current or future practice. So when we look at this in detail, we're just looking at, is their CPD relevant to their role? They can't log just any random activity of CPD, like attending a football game. It would need to be something that's at least semi-partially linked to their job role or development as a biologist in some way. The third one is ensuring their CPD has benefited their practice, and most importantly, reflecting on this. That reflection is really the key word that we look at in CPD. So somebody might write, attended this conference, went to a lecture. Well, that's all well and good, but what did you learn from it? What are you going to use it for in the future? And, how are you going to take that forward? So we would be expecting people to talk about kind of how they're going to take the knowledge forward into their job role or either a volunteer role or something like that. And then the fourth one is similar. It's to do with reflecting on the benefits of the CPD to other people. So maybe if you're a lecturer, how is that going to help your students, or how is that going to help a client that you work with, or your other employees? So that could be something like if you've learned a new statistical technique at a conference, applying that, and how is that going to help everyone you work with? Maybe it will save everyone else time. Just a short reflection on the benefit to other people. So CPD is something which gets reviewed, every registrant should be doing. We review it once per year as part of the CPD audit, and then those registrants who are selected for review will get feedback on their CPD and how it might be improved, or telling them that they've met the standards. So I'm going to briefly pause there. Did anyone have any questions so far?
Yes, Cara, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I know as an assessor for you guys and the Science Council, etc., for chartered biologists, chartered scientist, if we look at that, as you say, it's level 7 and MSc, but if you don't have that formal level 7 qualification, you have to submit, as I'm sure you're aware, something called the equivalency report. Now, how does that work for chartered biologists who say have a level 6 bachelor's? The reason I ask is because I was a chartered scientist and had submitted this supplementary report in addition to the standard competency report before I actually became a chartered biologist. So I wonder if you've taken that into account, the fact that I was one, I became another. And in the absence of, say, being a chartered scientist with a BSc, is there any sort of mandate to submit additional information to demonstrate over and above the standard form that you're working at level 7?
Yeah, so this is kind of still in development, but I think what we're going to do is create an equivalency process, which is fairly similar to what we have already for the Science Council registrations. So at the moment, yeah, as you said, if somebody's wanting to apply for CSI or CSI Teach, they can submit an equivalence report, which I believe is 1,000 words, and it's a report on a project or something similar which demonstrates working to that level. So we'll probably just adopt that process for chartered biologists as well, to give people, who might not necessarily have the formal qualification, the chance. So once we've got that in place and the guidance will send that out. But at the moment, when people submit that for the other registers, that report goes to just one assessor, and then the assessors will like confirm or not whether they believe that's to the right level. So yeah, I think we definitely will have that in place. Any other questions?
Hi, Cara, it's Mira.
Hi.
I've got 3 questions actually. So first one is, when you're moving from MRSB to the fellow FRSB, is this automatic, or do the candidates have to apply for that?
Candidates will have to apply for fellowship. So the fellowship applications go to our fellowship committee, which sits under the memberships, and they review the applications, and then you'll be told like confirmation of whether you're going to be nominated as a fellow or not.
Perfect. And can you belong to more than 2 registers, or is there a cap on 2 registers?
You can belong to more than 2. It slightly depends which ones they are. So the Science Council ones kind of have like progression between them. So you would never be RSci-Tech and RSci at the same time, for example. But you could be, for example, chartered scientist, chartered biologist, and UK Register of Toxicologist, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
They fall under slightly different like categories.
Perfect. And can non-UK residents join RSB and go for the chartered biologist?
Yes,
status?
100%. Yeah, we have members from all over the world, spanning from like the UK, Australia, Hong Kong, everywhere. And yeah, so when we get an international application, it just means that myself or my colleague Francesca will look into the qualifications a little bit more detail to see kind of where they meet the UK equivalents, to help determine like membership level and what register they might be able to join.
Perfect. Just one more question. If you belong to, say, the RSC and you've been collecting CPD points on their CPD scheme, can they transfer those CPD points to RSB?
At the moment, we don't have a direct transfer with them, but it would probably be a case of I know that they use quite similar standards for recording, so it'd probably be a case where you'd have to just like copy the information from one record to the other to save the points to your RSB record as well.
Perfect. And can you do the chartered biologist? It's probably no, but can you do that through the RSC as well as the RSB, or is it just the RSB that?
It's just the RSB. So the RSC have their own, they have chartered chemist.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's the equivalent to that, but for chemistry.
That's what I thought, but I've been told otherwise. But no, that's fine. I'll tell them. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Cara, could I ask 2 very quick questions?
Mm-hmm.
One is related to something actually Mira said. Now, if you look at chartered scientists, I know this as someone that works for the Science Council, that's recognised within the European Economic Area, and Brexit hasn't affected that. You mentioned the fact that you have members from all over the world. So is it basically anyone from any country can apply for chartered biologists, providing they meet the criterion that you just alluded to? Or is it like chartered scientists where it's recognised specifically within, say, the European Economic Area? Although I think you did say you have members from Australia, so I'm guessing it's anywhere where they can meet the criterion.
Yeah, it's anywhere they can meet the criteria. We do have a recognition process with a organisation called the ECBA, which is the European Commission for Biological something. So basically anyone from anywhere can apply as long as they're meeting the competencies and their qualifications meet the right level, and the application would need to be in English for obvious reasons. But yeah, basically anyone can apply, but we're hoping that over time the internationalization of it will increase. So we'll kind of keep reviewing that as we go, but at the moment that's the case.
And one more sort of point of clarification really for myself, but also in terms of why I'm here. If you accrue a certain number of points, as Mira was talking about, are you automatically kept on the register? So essentially there's an element of trust. And if that's so, is there any sort of auditing of a subset of the CPD forms every year?
Yeah, so what happens is, yeah, anyone who meets the points requirements is automatically kept on the register. And then once per year, we audit about 20% of the registrants. So that's something which we normally do it around like November, December time. So then we take a selection of CPD records and look at them in much more detail, kind of give them a bit more of a full review process and see, you know, how they filled it out, but filled it out badly. And if so, we give them feedback and a chance to improve. So even with the CPD audit, it's not like you immediately fail and get kicked off. You'll get feedback and the chance to improve it over the space of a few months, and then you can resubmit. So that's the way we kind of monitor it, just because we can't, the numbers, we just can't look at everyone's CPD in full detail because it'd take us, you know, a whole year to do that.
Yeah, it's the
so
same
we
with
take a
science
selection.
council. So thank you.
No worries. So I'm just going to quickly talk about a brief overview of the application process. You'll all be aware of this site. This is our microsite for members, so you'll all have your own account. This is how people go if they want to start applying for membership or chartered biologist. It's pretty straightforward. It's like a online job application. So somebody logs on, they select which register they want to apply to. They'll then get taken to this page, which has all of the various checks on the way. Most of it is fairly simple until you get to the competencies at the end, and that's the main written bulk of the application. So once somebody has done this and they've submitted their application, the next steps are we wait for references to come in. So each person is asked to provide 2 referees. However, they only actually need 1 reference to be eligible. We just ask for 2 in case we sometimes have issues where a reference doesn't reply for ages, and then the applicant's kind of in this limbo phase where they don't know what's going on. So we ask for 2 references just for the speed to help with their application. And then so the first review is by RSB staff, which is myself and my colleague Francesca, who couldn't be here this afternoon, but you'll all meet her in due course. So we check the references, we check the person's CV to make sure they've met those experience requirements. We then check their academic qualifications. So as part of the online application, somebody will upload like a scan of their degree certificates and things like that. We do a brief check of the competencies, more to make sure that they've completed them all and there's like nothing major missing. And then we also check that they've paid the application fee. So once all of these checks have been done, this is when an application will then go to 2 assessors. So we always use 2 assessors for each application so that there's 2 different views. You'll get sent the whole application, which is all of their competency answers. It will include their work background. And once you've received it, you can assume that the CV, the academic qualifications, and the references are all okay because we'll have checked them. So you don't need to worry about that bit. It's just the main bulk of the application and the competency answers. You'll then submit feedback for the applicant via a template form, which we'll produce. So we have a form which has all of the competencies listed in a table, and then a section for assessor comments and for you to put your outcome. So, and then you'll send that to either myself or Francesca via email. And then what we do is we collate the responses from both assessors, and then that determines the outcome for the applicant. So the next couple of slides go over the possible outcomes. So the first outcome, both assessors think that the applicant has met the competencies and they approve them to be elected to the Chartered Biologist Register. So 2 approves means that the applicant is accepted and they'll get elected at the next quarterly election. Second outcome, if one assessor approves it and the second assessor thinks that some more information is required, the applicant will receive feedback, which we will take from your assessor forms. And myself and Francesca will send the applicant the feedback. So you would never have like direct contact with an applicant. It always goes through RSB staff for GDPR reasons. And then the applicant will take some time to improve their application and resubmit it. So usually when that happens, they receive the feedback, they receive their application as a Word document, and then they will do any additions to it in another color or like bold font or italic, so that it's obvious where they've then made changes. So once the RSB staff receive the resubmission, we'll then send it back to the same two assessors and get outcomes again. If it's the case where one assessor has already approved it, you'll still receive the new application just for information, but we assume that your outcome has remained the same. And then if after they've submitted for a second time, an assessor still thinks that it hasn't met the criteria, then we might be looking at rejecting the applicant, or maybe advising, maybe perhaps they should need to wait for a year or gain some more experience before they're to reapply. The third potential outcome is similar to that one. If both assessors think more information is needed, we do the same thing, send the applicant the feedback. They will improve their application and resubmit it to us, and then the same two assessors will look at it again. In the case where one assessor thinks that the application should be rejected and the other one approves it, so quite different outcomes, we would then bring in a third assessor to just get a next view. And then after that, depending on the third assessor's outcome, it would go through one of the previous scenarios again. So the potential outcomes initially are approve, more information required, or reject. A note on rejections, just that it's generally quite rare that we would reject an applicant straight away. The normal reasons for rejection might be that they've applied and maybe not realized the criteria for education level or work experience. So if that's the case, that would usually be rejected by the RSB staff before it's gone to you. Other reasons for rejection might be something like it's really obvious they've plagiarized their application, or they simply haven't, they haven't met the competencies at all. Maybe they've got really short answers and things like that. But in general, the main outcomes would be either approve or more information. So we really try and help applicants in that way to give them a chance to improve and get feedback, like at least the first time around, which is similar to what we've done for Science Council as well. They normally get a chance to get some feedback. Unless, every now and then we get an applicant who just hasn't read the guidance properly. They have no idea what level they should be, or they're completely the wrong level to be applying. But that is quite rare, and that would normally be picked up by RSB staff. But if you're not sure, then you can always get in contact and ask us as well. Does anyone have any questions on these outcome scenarios?
Cara, it's Mira again. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. What happens if you know the applicant?
So if you think that you know the applicant, then you can let either myself or Francesca know, and we'll just ask you to kind of delete that application from your records, and we'll move in a different assessor. When we send the applications, we will always remove the name and the age, and if the gender's on there, we try and remove that just to remove any biases. But yeah, you might find, from somebody's descriptions that you realize that this is somebody who you work with. So if that's the case, then just let us know and we'll just allocate different assessors.
Okay, perfect. I know someone who's going to apply for it, so maybe I'll let you know who that is so that it doesn't come to me at all.
Yeah, that would be good. And the same, anyone else, if you know anybody in particular, then we can create a little list so that we know not to allocate that one to yourself.
Perfect, thank you.
Cara, it's Lawrence. I have one quick question. In terms of what I do for, say, the IST and Science Council, very occasionally, as you've said, similar to Chartered Biologist, you have an application for professional registration that it's obvious within a couple of minutes that it's just not going to meet the criterion. Perhaps they haven't answered the competencies properly, their answers are way too short. And in those situations, there is some provision for actual help or mentoring of candidates. Obviously, that's quite separate from the people who then assess, because clearly that would represent a conflict of interest. Do you do anything like that to give candidates who've submitted a poor application the chance to work with a third individual to try and improve it before it's formally resubmitted to the two assessors?
At the moment, we don't have like particular mentoring in place, partly just because of resourcing, but we can, like RSB staff can sometimes provide advice, but that's normally just over email. So there's been cases before when I've noticed people's applications, they've just like written a couple of sentences for each answer. So in that case, like we wouldn't send it to assessors, we'll just go back to them and say, please read the guidance, please read the example applications. This is the sort of level you should be looking at. Sorry. So at the moment, that's what we have. It might be that in the future, we can have a bit more of a mentoring system in place. And we're also looking to record some sessions for registrant, like for potential applicants, in terms of like how best to complete applications and things like that. So that will be a resource that will be there eventually. In the next few months, hopefully we'll get that in place. I know the Science Council have their registration sessions that they ran last year, so it'd be similar to that.
It's interesting you should say that, Cara. I don't want to, because I am one of those applicant support mentors. There's 3 of us that do that. And in fact, there's recordings of my workshops to facilitate sort of filling out the competencies for registration. So I'm going to make a pitch here. I know I probably shouldn't, but as someone that's done that for the Science Council in terms of the professional registers, if there's any sort of scope to get involved with that for you, I'd love to do that at some point, and I'll say no more. Thanks,
that's really good to know. Definitely, I think something that we could look at developing. So just in terms of our support for applicants at the moment, we have guidance on the website, which is in the process of being updated to our new competencies, which is kind of in this format. So we have the competency here and then an explainer of what the assessors are looking for. And that's been developed with a lot of help from David, who was on our CBiol review group the last couple of years. So that's kind of in progress and will be on the website very soon. The other thing that we will put up is some example applications as well. So as you're reviewing, if you get an application that you think, wow, this is outstanding, this is really great, please let our staff know so that we can maybe contact that applicant and see if they would mind having their application online and available for people to read as an example of, this is a really good one. What we might do when we put those together is take one competency from one applicant, another from somebody else, just so that it's a nice mixture of different types of experience and different types of answer and things like that. I thought I'd schedule in a few like little breaks. So if no one's got any other questions on the first section, we'll go for a 10-minute break. Okay, great.
I can't hear.
Oh, hi, Bridget. We've just had a break, so we're just waiting for everyone to come back.
Sorry, I forgot all about it again.
No problem. I've recorded the session from the start, so I'll make sure to send you that tomorrow, and then you can watch the first bit.
Can you hear me, Cara?
Yeah, got you, Lawrence.
Right, I'll just go on mute then.
So do you want us to go on mute?
Yeah, just while I'm presenting, just because it reduces like the feedback and
Okay.
background, if you wouldn't mind.
I probably pressed the wrong thing. Mute.
Okay, I think we've got everyone back.
Oh, just reporting back in.
Thanks, Stephen. I might just wait one more minute, just in case.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get started again. So next steps, I just wanted to talk a bit more about actually completing assessment, giving feedback and general things to look out for in applications. So step one is attend training, which you're all here for today, so that's great. Step two would be practice applications. Because the chartered biologist competencies that we're training on are all new, it's going to be a bit different because none of you have assessed for chartered biologists before. So to start with, you'll participate in assessments, and we'll have, on like the first one that you do, we'll have a discussion with the second assessor just to see that kind of everyone's in line and like looking for the same things, and nobody's completely doing something very different. And then you'll be added to the our list of active assessors. And over time, you'll be periodically invited for refresher training. So that's normally roughly once a year. And then the selection of you will be asked to help out with the CPD audit as well, which will be a separate training session. That's normally around November and December. So you'll have been reviewing for quite a while by then. We'll also try and pair new assessors with those of you who have done assessments before for the other registers. So Bob, Lawrence, I think that, yeah, you've both definitely been our reviewers before. So you might be a bit active in the first couple of months while we get everyone kind of training up. But just to say, like, if you're ever not sure on the outcome for an applicant, then just feel free to send an email in and we can always have a conversation or set up a meeting with another assessor, bring in a third assessor if necessary, things like that, whilst everyone's kind of learning the processes and how to do assessments. That's fine. Just a note on education levels, I mentioned it earlier, but we can, the RSB staff are mainly responsible for checking education, and we check against international standard classification of education for international applicants. So we should always be able to make a comparison from somebody who's done their qualifications somewhere else, or has slightly different, not just the straight GCSE A-level degree masters. We kind of have documents with all the different types of things at different levels. Things like apprentices now go up to level 6 and 7 and above. So we have kind of ways to look at different things as well. Again, if it's mentioned in the application and you're not sure, you have a question, you can just let us know and we can look at it further. Maybe we can ask for people's transcripts for their degrees and things like that if that's necessary. So on to competence. So I've taken this definition from the Science Council. Competence means that you have a sufficiency of knowledge and skills that enable you to act in a wide variety of situations, which means that you have the skills and knowledge that enable you to do all aspects of your job effectively. The Chartered Biologist applications break this down into 5 different areas. So area A is knowledge and skills. Area B is the professional approach. Area C is communication and collaboration. D is responsibility, and E is supporting the profession.
Can I say something, Cara?
Yeah, of course.
They broadly align with the 5 competencies for the RSci Tech, RSci and CSci registers.
Yes, so when we developed the new competencies for CBiol, we've tried to align it with the Science Council ones, and then also the requirements with the Royal Society of Chemistry for Chartered Chemist and the IOP for Chartered Physicist as well. David?
I was just going to say exactly what you said. When we did the review of the competencies, we mapped them across the Institute of Physics, the Royal Society of Chemistry and the Science Council on the grounds that all 4 of us should be looking for the same sort of outcomes. And so they differ in some specifics that have to do with the subject, but are otherwise broadly similar, but in words that suit our style, if that makes sense.
Thanks, David. So I've created this table which kind of just summarizes a bit about what's being looked for in each competency section. So section A is specifically about your work as a biologist, work also including volunteering as well, or other activities. So it's not just your 9 to 5 things that you're doing outside of that, and how you've used your knowledge and skills in the field. Professional approach is looking at continuous improvement, accepting responsibility and generating a trust in your outcomes. So examples of how you're doing that. Section C is looking at how you're sharing your subject with others. So for example, other colleagues at your workplace, students you're teaching, general public, and maybe people you work with in like volunteer capacity or other roles that you might have. Section D is focused on your impact on others in your work, recognizing legal, ethical, and moral challenges of your role as a biologist. Section E is looking at how engaged you are with developing the profession and how you help others progress within the profession of biology as well. So this is some brief notes on just generally what to look for in competency answers. So the first question, you can kind of use this as like a bit of a framework. First question, is the example that the person's given clear and relevant to the question? Have they actually described what they're being asked to do? Have they provided enough specific detail? So for you as an outsider to their job role, have they provided enough for you to understand what they're doing and why this example is relevant? If not, think about why not and what other details they might be able to add to help with that. Can you list the outcomes to what they're saying? And always referring back to the guidance descriptions, which you'll all receive a copy of. So does their example actually align with the requirements that are being asked for?
It's Bob. Can I just say something? One of the issues I've had with applications is for a competency, somebody will say, see this other competency. Now, clearly that's not acceptable, is it? Because if one of them's wrong, right, the other one's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, so that would definitely be a case where, you know, we ask them for some more information to answer each question kind of individually. I mean, you can take the application as a whole, but they can't just be referring back. We also get it sometimes where people will say, like, see this on my CV, which again, they need to expand and like actually give a full detailed examples. David?
I mean, using similar evidence for two competencies shouldn't be a problem as long as you can show how that evidence supports each competency.
Yeah.
Because most things you do in life have more than one impact or more than one effect. So I think C competency X is wrong, but using the same evidence explained in a different way should be fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Cara, can I make a point?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just really going back to what was just said as an assessor and mentor, say for the Science Council and IST, that in life there aren't these divisions, and often, you know, something that involves technical knowledge might involve, say, training somebody in a particular technique, which is communication. So I always say for the classical registers, it is okay to recontextualize the same scenario for different competencies, because in the real world, that's how things work. And then the only other point that I wanted to bring out, if you don't mind me saying, Cara, and I'm going back to professional registration, is it's really important that you stress the outputs. And by that, you know, did what you put in place to sort of address a scenario or problem, did it work? Because I've had situations where people have said, I've identified this problem, this is what I did, but they've never actually said if it's worked. And in effect, that's the thing that validates your solution. So it's really important that that you do look for outputs in answers.
Thanks, Lawrence. The next slide is just some tips on giving feedback that's helpful to applicants. So when you guys submit your reviewer forms, we RSB staff will compile this feedback from both assessors and then send it to the applicant. So as much as you can, this is just about trying to make your feedback, you know, actually helpful and useful for the applicant. So, you know, don't be offensive. I'm sure none of you would. Don't belittle their role in any way. Try and think about ways that you can word it, which is, you know, pleasant to read, and it's not going to put the applicant off. So I would say, imagine that you're the applicant themselves reading this. Be specific. So, you know, if they're missing something or they're missing an example, tell them what type of example they might be able to include. You might be able to get that from the rest of their application. You know, if you know what their job role is, you can say, you know, an example detailing a time when you have done this. That's really helpful, and it gives the applicant like a framework on exactly what they need to do. Be complimentary where they have answered the question well, because, you know, again, we want to encourage the applicant to improve and move forward, not just, oh, you haven't done very well, and, you know, we don't want them to read it and get upset or give up. So whenever you're doing that, try and just think about this, and yeah, put yourself in the applicant's shoes, I think is the best way to put it.
Cara, can I ask a question related to something you've said about professional conduct? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So I've assessed maybe about 200 competency forms for the IST, RSB, and principally the Science Council. And it's interesting you talk about us being professional, because I had one, it was just one, where the candidate was making personal attacks in the form, basically to the effect that, well, there was this problem, but I'm not surprised because this person's a belligerent bugger, for want of a better term. And clearly something very unprofessional. Now, I'm assuming if we discover that in an application, that we just refer it back to you. I've only had one, literally one out of about 200, but there was one where it was, you know, quite tendentious language that I didn't find acceptable. Would we just sort of bounce that back to you?
Yeah, in that case, yeah, just bounce that back to us. It would be, sounds like if it was something like that, it probably would be going against the RSB General Code of Conduct, which would be a ground for like rejecting the application.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So I've put on here, it seems obvious, examples of feedback that's not helpful. Simply putting, this answer does not address the competency. This doesn't help them identify why they haven't met the competency or how to address it. So again, just referring back to using polite and helpful language and remembering the applicants will see what you write. So here's an example of feedback that would be really helpful, detailing exactly where the extra example is required and giving them some tips. So reflecting on the successes or the learnings, like Lawrence mentioned earlier, reflecting on what this bit of work has led to is always really good in competency answers. Just some common feedback points, which from those of you who are reviewers or in the education sector, you've probably had this a lot. We're always asking applicants to give either clearer examples or further examples of the role that they've done. The examples are sometimes not in enough depth or enough detail. So when we're giving feedback around that, we like to give the applicants some questions to think about. So, what did you do? How did you do it? Why did you do it? And what did you learn from it? And then the third one, which I think we'll all come to know well, is asking the applicant to give answers based on what they've done. So we quite often will read an application where it's written like, my team did this and it led to this, but they need to talk about their actual own contribution to that and what they've learned from it specifically, not as a team as a whole. These common points are going to be on the guidance information for applicants. So hopefully over time, as people see the guidance, they'll kind of address this for us. But I would say these are probably the most common points of feedback in general. So the next slide is just about spotting plagiarism. It is quite rare. I think since I've been here for almost 2 years, I've probably had about 3 applications where this has been an issue. But some easy ways to spot it are if the language style has suddenly changed, the use of bullet points that maybe aren't explained very well. You can always Google search a given phrase as well if you think it might be plagiarized from like a publication. But if you ever do suspect it, then again, just get in touch with the RSB staff and we'll have a look at the application in more detail. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but if it is suspected, it's worth just doing an extra check. I actually used to work on a plagiarism team in my previous job, so I've got plenty of experience with dealing with plagiarism. And again, this would be grounds for rejecting application because it would be against the professional code of conduct for the RSB. So yeah, we do want to keep an eye out for it, but it is fairly rare. So on to the process of making assessments. Our portal that staff use is called Marvin. So if you ever hear us talking about somebody called Marvin, we're referring to the IT system. So when you receive it, the application will be anonymized. Key information like their age and gender will be removed. And as a volunteer, obviously we appreciate you don't have to complete every assessment. Normally what we'll do is we'll email out a few assessors when an application comes in and we'll say, hi, David, are you free at the moment to complete this over the next few weeks? Let us know. So we generally ask first before you just receive one out of the blue. And that's a chance, we appreciate you're all volunteering. You all have other commitments, other jobs, family, things like that. Sometimes they get in the way. So if it is the case when you don't think you can do an assessment, just let us know and it's absolutely fine. We don't want you to feel pressure that you have to be available all of the time for us. We appreciate the time that you can give. And then the assessments, we usually would like them back from assessors within about 3 weeks, just to help with so the applicant's not waiting for too long to hear an outcome. So when you've completed the assessment, you can fill in your assessors forms and submit those comments and recommendations to RSB staff, and then we'll go through those outcomes that were on the first few slides. If you've said yes to an application and then something's come up, you're unwell or anything else, again, just let us know so that we can let the applicant know that there might be a bit of a delay, or we can look at allocating a different assessor. Any questions on that so far?
Sorry, Cara, can I ask 2 questions, please? Firstly, it's about the plagiarism that you mentioned just now. But as I said earlier, I'm working at the university at the moment, and from what I can see, students are getting very well. Hopefully, this don't happen to applicants, but our students are getting a bit creative in terms of trying to get people to write their essays and stuff for them. So with the application form itself, I would assume the person would have given the application details to the person they want to contract to write this. So in terms of stuff like that, it's going to be quite difficult to actually spot or to actually pick out, where plagiarisms actually happened or things like that. But in your experience, I'm assuming we don't get high rates of that, do we? Because I'm conscious that the rates are getting a bit high in higher education, and there is not a lot that universities are doing to penalize or to actually do anything to this. Because if you go and approach the essay mills, they're saying, oh, we've just provided information as a guidance. We didn't ask the student to just copy and paste, but it's their fault for copying and pasting. So there's nothing that can be done to actually penalize these essay mills.
Yeah, I think with that, to be honest, we'd have to, in a way, like hope. And I think applicants for chartered biologists, when they're at that level, would be a bit more, working to more professional standards and completing applications themselves. But you have to have 6 to 8 years of experience to apply. So it would be, somebody who's taking their role kind of more seriously and at a high level. So I like to think that we don't have much of that. Since I've been working here, I think we've had like 1 case of suspected plagiarism, and that was where they were talking about a particular SOP in their application, and they'd like directly copied it. So that was where we just explained to them, like, that's not really answering the question. So in that case, we didn't actually reject it because I think they'd misunderstood what they needed to do rather than kind of done it in a malicious way. So it's more that to look out for.
Yeah, okay, thanks. The other question that I have is, because you mentioned about in Marvin, when we get the applications, then they're being anonymized. This refers back to Mira's question earlier about what if we think this may be an applicant that we know, but because it's anonymized, we can't really tell if. So I'm assuming even if we suspect it, but we're not 100% sure, do you just want us to flag it and say, maybe this profile fits somebody who I know? Or is it because it's been anonymized, if we're not 100% sure, you still want us to just carry on?
So yeah, if you suspect that you might know them, just let us know and we'll kind of have a look at the person. The other thing is, because we've got like your guys' work histories, we can make sure that we don't send you people from like the same employers that you have in the last few years and things like that, so that we kind of have an internal way of avoiding that as much as possible as well. But yeah, if you do think that you might know them, then just let us know and we can switch people around. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So the next slide, this is just about confidentiality. So as I've said, the name, gender and age will be redacted. So applications will always be sent with like a reference number, and that's how we'll like keep track of who's who. But they might have some personal information in the applications. They're likely to talk about, you know, their job title and where they work and things like that. So just to say, you know, please don't share this information with anyone. Once an application is concluded and we've been through the election and they've been elected, you can like delete the emails relating to that applicant, so that you're not keeping information on file for longer than is necessary. And yeah, like I said, if you do feel like you know anyone, just let us know as well. We will have a like confidentiality form for everyone to sign, which will be sent out along with all the like documentation for this for you all. So just to say, really, and I'm sure that you would all be working to professional standards anyway, and you're all aware of GDPR and everything. So I've mentioned elections a couple of times. So we elect our members and registrants officially 4 times a year. So these are in January, April, July and October. So what happens is, as registrants apply, they can apply anytime through the year. But then these are the 4 dates when we will elect anyone who's been approved. So you know, anyone who's applied between September and December will generally be elected in January, and so on. So it's kind of just to say that. And in the fortnight before each of these elections, that's when we'll arrange our assessors meeting. So normally with those, we'll have a selection of applications available and their outcomes, so that we can just make sure everyone's kind of in agreement with those outcomes, and any disputed, so you know, anywhere one assessor thinks it should be approved and one thinks it should be rejected, we'll raise those applications there and kind of discuss as a group to come up with the best to come up with the official outcome for the candidate. And then any other matters relating to the panel will be discussed in these meetings. So you know, any updates to the competencies and things like that will be discussed in these meetings. They will probably be, the RSB is still kind of getting together the policy for meetings, but they'll probably be remote to begin with, and then potentially one in person, like once per year or something like that. But that's kind of under discussion with the events team at the moment. So just a few more points to note. Assessors are required to maintain your own CPD records, as I'm sure you're all doing to an excellent standard already. Being part of this panel, as I said, can contribute to your CPD. So this would come under professional body activity. As a gesture to thank you all for the time that you dedicate to this, your chartered biologist fees will be waived whilst you're serving on the panel. And then finally, the role of assessors is to review and recommend applications for registration. And when you do that, the applicant is then recommended to the Membership and Professional Affairs Committee. So they kind of have the final say. And if any applicants ever appeal a decision, then it would go firstly through this panel and then to the Membership and Professional Affairs Committee as well. A few top tips for assessors. Try and read the whole application before beginning your assessment. This gives you time to think about the application as a whole, and you can see where, you know, maybe they might have addressed competencies in different sections. So consider the application altogether. Try not to leave too much time between reading it and starting your assessor form. And also just to remember that you're now a representative of the Chartered Biologist Register and the RSB. So being an advocate where you can to your networks and other people that you might know in professional capacities would be really helpful. You can share that you are an assessor on LinkedIn, Twitter, and things like that. If you do, just be aware that you might get applicants contacting you. I think it's very rare, but if anyone ever does message you on something like LinkedIn and say, oh, I know you're a chartered biologist assessor and I submitted my application and what's the outcome? Please don't tell them any information, just send them our email addresses so they can get in touch with the RSB staff and we'll answer their questions. Try and avoid any personal contact with applicants as much as possible. Obviously, in the case where you're working with somebody who you know is applying, that's a bit different. But yeah, just any requests through like any social media channels, just send them our contact details and tell them to get in touch with us. Any questions? And I wanted to ask as well our experienced assessors if they had any more top tips for everyone.
I have a question, Cara.
Yeah, sure.
For these election meetings, are we all expected to attend each one of those, or only those who have been involved in the assessing during that period?
So we'll try and arrange them so that as many assessors are able to attend as possible. So yeah, even if you've not completed an assessment in the last couple of months, if you can still attend, it's helpful. We try and schedule them like in lunch hour time, so between like 12:30 and 1:30. And the arranging will be the same as this. So we'll do like a doodle poll, and then whichever date kind of the most people can come to is what we'll do. And then we'll type up minutes, which will then be available for everyone as well. So, you know, we understand that, you know, not everyone will be able to come to every single one, but that's what the minutes are for, to kind of catch up. And yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
All right.
Cara, can I ask 2 questions and make one, as you mentioned, tips? I'll make
sure.
one tip I use. So I'll start with the tips. So I've maybe completed about 200 assessments over the last 4 to 5 years for the Science Council and associated licensed bodies like the IST, latterly the RSB. And what I'd say, based on personal experience, but also formal guidance, is if the competency has been met, if you like, unequivocally, then there isn't need to sort of say a lot. However, if you feel that the answer is insufficient, which happens a lot, or there's ambiguity, so that you're basically asking the candidate to clarify what they're saying or provide more detail, I tend to read that, go away, reflect on it, and then read it again to make sure that I'm sort of, so if you like, convinced of my own reason for rejecting it before I then sort of put pen to paper. And the other thing I'd say is that if you are asking candidates to basically modify their competency script in some way, those responses should obviously be a lot more detailed than those where it's a straightforward pass.
Thanks, Lawrence.
2 questions. One is in relation to Science Council registers. For the CBiol, is there a time limit? Because I know for the Science Council registers, it's technically 3 years. I tend to say 3 to 5, okay? So they can take reflective practices from the last 3 to 5 years. And the other thing, given that most scientists, I think the statistics still show this, particularly at lower levels, are on contracts. So within a period of, say, 5 years, they may have had 2 jobs. And moreover, one job might suit one set of competencies more than another. Can you actually cherry pick answers from 2 different jobs? And that being so, would you therefore provide 2 references to validate those 2 jobs?
So the first question on the years, yeah, we will ask for, like, majority of their application should be based on recent-ish experience. So yeah, like within the last 3 to 5 years, in general.
Yeah.
And then with the multiple jobs, do you mean as an applicant, could they can rely on experience from multiple job roles?
Yes, because sometimes you find, this is common in science, as I'm sure you know, Cara, that people will go from one job to another. And I had this for my own both CBiol and in fact CSci application, that I actually found that a previous job was much more technical. So it was more conducive to competency A. So I deliberately cherry picked scenarios from that job, whereas my current job is more about teaching. So it's more about communication and organization. So that, in my estimation, was more conducive to, say, competency B and C. So I basically filled out competencies B and C from my present job, and competencies, certainly A, which is talking shop, and to an extent D, from a previous role, because I felt it was more suitable. Can you do that for a chartered biologist?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, that would be fine. And yeah, I think we would just, yeah, we would verify that from multiple references. Normally people do put more than one referee anyway. So we do normally have two. Yeah.
Cara?
Yeah.
You just mentioned you would verify that. I mean, obviously I do assessments for a living. I've probably done over 2,000. I mean, not for a chartered thing, they're for legal purposes. Now, we always use a verification process to ensure that all assessors are coming up with exactly the same results. Are you going to introduce a verification process or simply rely on the assessors?
So part of that is what we'll do in the quarterly quarterly election meeting. So before they happen, what myself and Francesca will do is we pull together like a selection of the applications that have come through and what the outcomes were, and then we'll kind of circulate them to everyone so
that sounds more like a standardization process, which you'd have to do anyway. So you standardize everything and everybody's sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not really the same as a verification process where you get qualified verifiers who check at the end and just to make sure that the process is being followed correctly.
Yeah, I'm not
maybe
sure that...
it's not required in this instance because it's not a sort of a legal thing, is it? It's not a legal requirement. CBiol.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, no, I don't think we would have that as such. It would more just be like comparing outcomes from different assessors,
which is standardization, and that would be normal. Yeah.
Standardizing.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, just ask.
Can I ask Stephen a question in that regard?
Yeah.
So, as you're saying, it's about two assessors concurring, which essentially is standardization. So, what is a qualified verifier, Stephen? I don't even know.
A verifier is somebody who checks assessors to make sure they're up to the assessment job, and they come out with a safe decision on their assessment. It's required in legal purposes where technical competencies in certain jobs where they're dealing with, say, potentially seriously dangerous biological material or chemical material. By law, they have to hold a competency, and that's checked by a qualified assessor who is further checked by an internal verifier, and they're checked by an external verifier, just to totally ensure that the entire process is legal.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
But it's probably a bit over the top for what we're doing here.
Thanks, Stephen.
Cara,
yeah.
I don't know if you gave this. What is the total number of assessors?
So the total is
approximately
19 or 20.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at my list of like.
So you basically have half of us here today.
Yeah. Yeah, so with the people who aren't here, what I'm going to do is share the recording and then set up like a shorter Q&A session for them to ask me any questions. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. So yeah, roughly 19, I think. So the last section really is to go through the competencies in a bit more detail. So this is where David Coates is going to step in.
Okay.
Hi, David. You'll just have to let me know when you want to go on to the next slide.
Yeah. Cara, have you shared the detailed competencies with everyone?
No, I was going to do that afterwards once I've shared the PowerPoint. So we've got them on the slides now. So shall I just start on the section A?
Yeah, so I mean, I was hoping everybody already had a copy of this because I'm not sure it's really helpful to read them all out to you, but while they're on screen, I can go through some of the logic of what's been going on here. So as Cara said before, we've split this into 5 areas. We did this as an exercise working with the Royal Society of Chemistry, who are revising their competencies, and the Institute of Physics, who have done a major job of looking at chartered status for physics, and recognizing that all 3 of us are aligned to the Science Council. So we wanted things where it sort of made sense between the different charters, but with the focus on our subject areas. Dividing it into 5 areas should make it easier for people. And one of the complaints previously was about the difficulty that individuals had thinking about, the slide has disappeared. Cara?
Sorry about that. I'm just reopening it. It just completely randomly crashed itself.
Right, it does that less often than Teams, so that's a good thing. I'll carry on while Cara's sorting it out. What we've done for each of the areas is used some of the experience we have with accreditation to try and explain what we're looking for in these. So the left-hand column is always the competency, which is written in careful language that's supposed to encapsulate the competency. The middle column is really to help people write their applications, but also to help assessors look at those applications. And we've expanded it a bit from other areas so that we can give applicants a better view about what it is we're looking for. And then there are examples on the right-hand side. One of the interesting things that we discovered when we did accreditation is when you write guidance, people think that's what they're supposed to do, whereas guidance is actually examples, hence the further guidance and examples. These are not definitive, these are just ways of doing it, and it's the question in the middle that needs to be answered. So knowledge and skills is exactly what it says, and apart from one other section, it's the only one that's specifically about biology. The rest of it is about being a professional scientist, although I have to be careful with that term, because I think one of the differences between biology and the physical sciences in particular is that it should be perfectly possible to be a chartered biologist without being employed as a biologist. And that's because there are large numbers of people who are volunteers for biological organizations who are actually treating that volunteering role in a professional manner. And it should be possible to recognize them as experts in their fields as well, and in the way they behave. So for instance, somebody who worked for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds They may be doing that as a weekly volunteering, but they're probably more expert about it than many biological professionals around the place. So we wanted to have the language in such a way that you didn't have to have a job, but you did have to have a role. And that's what we need to be looking at, I think. So knowledge and skills is fairly obvious. Explain your knowledge and skills. How do you carry on developing that? The CPD and your interest in biology, and how do you use that in your work? And then critical thinking and problem solving, because fundamentally that's a skill of professional people and senior people managing a role. Could I have the next slide, please? The second one is standard really for any charter. It's just we've put biologist in instead of any other word. And it's about autonomy, accountability, integrity, and it's looking for examples where you've been given responsibility. And I think to address one of Lawrence's comments earlier on, and were able to show success in delivering the task. And it's about demonstrating that others have trust in your actions. So that thing about it's not just something you did, but it worked, is an important part of what is being looking for there. And hopefully that comes across through both B1 and B2. Next slide. So this is the largest section, I think, with 5 areas. And it's looking for examples of teamwork and how you contributed to that, planning, horizon scanning, strategic thinking. B4 is planning work and demonstrating foresight, but always with examples and evidence that you have been involved. What is your role in all of this? And B5 is how you exert influence. And again, examples of successfully leading initiatives, not just being part of them or triggering them off, by convincing others of the need for change. That's a sort of key feature of anybody who wants to make a difference. Next slide, please. Communication and collaboration is fairly straightforward. It's about communication with specialist and non-specialist audiences. And some of the wording here mimics the wording we have in accreditation of bioscience degrees. And that's because one of the things we want accreditation to do is to prepare people for becoming chartered biologists. So there's quite a lot of evidence that people could use if they had done an accredited degree that fits the competencies within the charter. So they'll have learned about it at university, they have to demonstrate they've done it outside. It's the different levels of communication where it's C1 is about your subject and C2 is about collaborative working. How do you work with other people using your knowledge to supplement their views? Next slide. A responsibility is largely the focus in health and safety, includes environmental issues and the requirements relevant to the role. Again, that builds on the accreditation criteria, but also maps across to the criteria for chemists, physicists, and more generally scientists. And then there are another couple of responsibility ones on the next slide. Really, D2 is the only bit outside of section A, which is specifically about biology, about knowledge and skills in biology. And we need to be looking for how they use that knowledge or skills in their work, whether that's professionally or as volunteers, but in how that's used to develop and lead initiatives. And the last one is about integrity and respect for confidentiality and the professional issues. And as with the others, it requires compliance with the Royal Society of Biology's Code of Ethical and Professional Conduct, as well as whatever professional codes there are in the particular area that they're working. And then the last section on the next slide is one we debated quite a long time, and were heavily influenced actually by the thinking from physics and chemistry, because being chartered is not just about your own standing in the profession, it's about how you help develop the profession as well. So, and it's about how you bring on young people, which is E2, how do you encourage others to move forward to develop their own skills? And how you support the development of the subject as a profession. We think it's a really important one, in some senses because of the history of chartered biologists. When it was part of the Institute of Biology, chartered status was given for life, as it were. One of the things we've discussed recently is that chartered status is something that should be ongoing, that should be continuous improvement and continuous development. And that's why we've changed the rules over maintaining chartered status. So although we had a significant number of people who held chartered status historically, we're now closing down that avenue completely and asking that anybody who is chartered should be able to evidence an annual professional development, continuous development, to maintain themselves as chartered now, not chartered 10, 20 or 30 years ago. And E1 talks to that quite strongly about making sure that biology develops much more as a profession with standards than just a hobby with an interest, even for those working in the field. But I'm very happy to take as many questions as you want on all of that.
I have a question, David. So you mentioned the fact that D2, I think it was in particular, without seeing the slide, is talking shop similar to A. So is that an example of where you could take one reflective practice, one scenario, word it in such a way that fits one or more of the sub-competencies of A, and then recontextualize it for D2?
Yes, I think entirely. I think that's true. But as you said before, I think there's a lot of other ones where you can do that, because communication can also be about the subject. And as you say, very few things are black and white. But yes, that's a good example where you could recontextualize it. But I don't think you could just say, look at A1.
No. And in fact, it's interesting you should say that, because for the Science Council registers, I've had people do that, and I've had to say, no, you've got to answer this competency in and of itself. So I'm going to have to reject it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And what about in the support for the profession in terms of accreditation, say on scientific papers, contribution of articles to scientific journals, E1? Would you expect somebody to actually cite the specific article in their competency form, or just say they've contributed in a very general way?
I mean, I suppose I would expect to see it in a way that an academic would normally do it, which is that I'm a reviewer for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think that would be enough, depending on the status of the journals. But I think that's what I would be looking for, and then making a judgment as to whether that was true or not.
All right.
Or valid.
Thank you.
Can I ask a sort of general question about the competencies? I was just wondering, are these up now on the website, or when will they be up if they're not up already?
So these are relatively new competencies. They've all been changed a bit. So the new guidance is targeted to be up on the website at the end of March, beginning of April. But you guys will receive these. I'll probably send out an email tomorrow with like this PowerPoint in and some other documents for you as well. So you'll have them very soon to refer to and kind of read in full.
I was just wondering for applications if there's a review in April, and if people are applying in advance of that, they will be doing that with the old set of competencies.
Yeah. So the next steps are that so once the new guidance is ready, which will be the end of March, we're going to basically email everyone who has a current application in progress, and we'll give them like a month or so notice to say, if you submit before this date, it will be to the old competencies, and if you submit after this, please refer to this guidance, and it will be to the new competencies.
All right, that's really useful information, because I also have a colleague who had an application. I think he'd started thinking about it. I don't know how active it was, but he hadn't quite done it. And yeah, so that's useful information. I can tell him to get a wriggle on, and then thanks.
No worries.
But as a general comment about these new ones, I think it's great that we're aligning with the other societies and across the board, and it looks really clear to me, the examples and guidance. So yeah, it's really good.
Thanks, that's good.
If people have, once you've had a chance to have a look through these things in detail when Cara sent them out, if you have questions, we're very happy to answer them. If you have suggestions for further guidance and examples, that would be helpful as well, because what people find difficult, I think, in doing these forms is thinking what's appropriate. And they quite often think that they quite often overthink it and make it much more complicated than it is, I think. Lawrence.
Yeah, in fact, I'll add to that by saying that by overthinking, one of the things I found as a Science Council assessor is obviously if you have sub-competencies, they're grouped under a common competency because they're obviously related. So sometimes the differences can be quite subtle. And you find that sometimes somebody will say, for example, answer B1 and B2, and you think to yourself, actually, if they were swapped around, it would be better. And in fact, Cara, I think you said that being so, you can accept them, can't you? Although you might think actually B1 better fits B2 and vice versa. But the fact that they're both there, you can accept that, can't you? Is that what you said, Cara?
Yeah, I think it depends on the extent in the application. But yeah, if it's like, you know, two competencies that are next to each other and you could literally just swap them around and they've covered both, I think that would be fine. If it's kind of like a common theme through the application where they've not answered the questions in the right way, then it might just be worth giving them that bit of feedback. So kind of on a case-by-case basis, if it's like just one or two, then yeah, that should probably be fine. But if it's like all of them don't quite match up, then we would probably give the feedback, even if it's just as simple as, you know, please consider that this answer may better answer E1, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, Cara.
So that basically takes us to almost the end of the training. Just a brief note on the structure of this panel and kind of where it sits with others. So the Chartered Biologist Assessors sits kind of under the registers, the General Registers Committee, which is chaired by Pat Kingston, who holds RSci and CBiol. She'll also be helping with CBiol assessments as well. She just couldn't make it today, but you'll all meet her probably at the next meeting. And then these both fall under the report to the Membership and Professional Affairs Committee. So in the case where every application which is accepted is kind of ratified by the MPA, and in the case where somebody has disputed that outcome, so I've not seen it for these registers, but if somebody's rejected and they say, oh, well, I don't think that I should have been rejected, and they want to raise an appeal or request for reconsideration, that goes straight to MPA. And then we have an appeals process in place for that. As I said, it's quite rare. I think over all the professional registers in the last year, I think there's been one appeal. So yeah, we tend to think that by giving them helpful feedback, chance to improve, that kind of limits the reasons that they would need to appeal an outcome. But if anything does happen, that goes to the Membership Professional Affairs Committee. And then finally, just the next steps. We've sort of covered this, but yeah, we're working on getting this competency guidance completed and on the website, which should be the end of March. At that point, we'll email everyone with an application in progress and give them a notice period to say that they need to submit by a certain date. And if they don't, it will then be assessed via the new competencies. And that's when you guys will come in. So it might be that now there's a little gap before you actually complete any reviews. But that gives us time to get the new guidance out to you, and we can work on any additions to that guidance and things like that. So the first applications that come into these competencies, as I said, I'll try and pair people who have assessed for other registers before with our newest assessors. And then all outcomes will be available to this group. And then we'll have our first quarterly meeting. And after this, you'll receive like email updates from myself and Francesca as well, who's my colleague, with instructions on a shared cloud drive, the new guidance, which we'll send out, and assessor forms, terms of reference, and organising meeting dates. So yeah, does anyone have any final questions on anything we've covered so far?
Yeah, I was just going to make a point actually, Cara, which is when I went through my Science Council registration training, and I basically did my first couple of applications, there was provision, if it was needed in this sort of virtual world we now live in, for the, shall we say, experienced assessor to hook up with the more rookie type assessor if there was, disparities, and it wasn't clear to the rookie, perhaps what the more experienced assessor meant, so that they could talk face to face, albeit in a virtual environment. Is that something that you would suggest might be useful for you? Is it something that you offer in terms of training for the less experienced assessors?
Yeah, that's definitely something we can arrange. That's fine. Yeah, we can just set up Zoom calls or Teams, something like that. Yeah, that would be fine. So last thing to say is just thank you all for coming. And yeah, you'll get these slides tomorrow, but these are all our email addresses. My colleague Francesca is providing support for me. So if you get an email from somebody called Francesca, that will be her. But yeah, I look forward to getting you all on board as assessors and getting started with this. So thanks to everyone, and I'll be in touch tomorrow with the slides, the recordings, guidance, and everything like that.
Thank you, Cara. That was very useful.
Yeah, thank you, Cara.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cara. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sorry, can I ask you something, Cara? Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
I know I missed some of the beginning ones. So you're saying they will probably be out to us tomorrow?
Yes, the system takes like quite
right.
only a few hours to process like longer recordings. So
Right.
it
Will that be in an email or something, or?
Yeah, so it will be
Right,
an email with like a link to download the.
Right, that's great. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks.